should say. Let's jump right into the story that came out from the Washington Post. This, I believe, is the first time any national outlet that covers the NFL has reported on the Texans and specifically the future of both Lovie Smith and Nick Caserio. Cody, you were the one who brought the story to my attention. Do you think I have that right? This is the first time that a national outlet has covered the future, the job security or lack thereof, of both Lovie and the GM, Nick Caserio.
Yep. This is the first time Washington Post, Jason La Canfora, and Jason's not always had the most sterling reputation in reporting some of these things, but who he talked to and what they said was more important than the fact that Jason La Canfora was the author of this article.
No question. So let's get right to it. So in the story, let's just read from it. Quote, there has been increasing chatter about the Houston Texans making more front office changes after the season, and multiple executives I've spoken with believe general manager Nick Caserio is not on nearly a solid footing as he was in the past. Longtime Caserio ally Jack Easterby and former team chaplain in New England when Caserio was there, who rose to become the most influential executive in Houston, was abruptly fired in October. The Texans are the NFL's lone one-win team and are facing another looming coaching decision. Having Caserio fire Lovie Smith 1 year after also making David Culley one and done seems untenable to some in the NFL agent and executive communities. Starting entirely from scratch might have better optics. So let's pause there for a moment. We've talked about this. The optics of firing another minority head coach, regardless, still firing another coach, one and done, and Caserio getting the opportunity to pick a third coach. About time someone else started talking about how the optics of that look terrible nationally.
Well, and that's the thing, too. You could point to a bunch of the different things Nick Caserio has done, and there's small wins here or there for him, but as he's continued to write his story as the general manager, two big negatives stand out, and that's both of the head coach hires that he's made. Leslie Frazier and Jim Caldwell in the first coaching cycle instead of David Culley might have been an option. In this most recent coaching cycle, Jonathan Gannon or Brian Flores, or reopening the search after he decided, or it was told to him that he couldn't hire Josh McCown. That's two things that are the biggest marks against Nick Caserio in his time as the general manager of this team. And you guys know my theory on the word optics. Anytime you're talking about the word optics, it's about something negative. Nobody talks about the good optics, okay? Optics is a PR crisis word. It's like, what are the optics of this? What are the optics of this? Optics is not a good word when you start associating that with your business. And so, yeah, the clean sweep, the from scratch, I mean, that's kind of how Cal McNair's operated in the past. He's been quick to make decisions on people. He's been quick to move on from people. That's been his MO as the owner of this franchise and as the decision maker of this team, is he'll make a quick decision. He's not afraid to write a check and make people go away.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to have three head coaches in 3 years of an NFL franchise. The last time it happened was in San Francisco, where they fired Chip Kelly after 1 year, then they fired Jim Tomsula after 1 year, but by the time they brought in that third head coach in that third year, they had a new GM calling the shots. So it's understandable that some in the NFL agent and executive communities are assuming that this is untenable, are saying that there's no way the same GM is going to be allowed to hire three head coaches in 3 years. So it makes a little bit of sense to me that there are folks, Jake, in the NFL community who are baffled by the thought that there is a chance that Nick Caserio would be allowed to fire and then hire another head coach this early.
Here's perhaps the most important quotes in this Washington Post story. Quote, if the Texans do in fact believe another coaching change is in order, several GMs I've talked to said they do not think Caserio would still be there to fire Smith and be part of the next hiring cycle. Houston's rebuild has been agonizing. Signs of progress have been limited at best, and Houston's ownership has been erratic since Cal McNair took over after his father's death in 2018. Keep your eye on that one, said one high-ranking NFL official who has interviewed with the Texans in the past and knows the organization well, but who spoke on the condition of anonymity. I can't say that word. But
anonymity.
Thank you. Because he is precluded from discussing other organizations publicly, I don't think Nick gets to fire another coach, especially with Easterby gone. I'm hearing there is more to come there. So someone high up in an NFL front office who's interviewed for a Texans job is hearing that there could be more to come. This is now the first time someone connected to a big-time national outlet, the Washington Post, is reporting that it could be that clean house that it seems like a lot of Texans fans would be on board with if they do, in fact, fire Lovie. You fire Nick at that point, you start all over.
The Jack Easterby situation may still have some tendrils connected to this organization. The abrupt firing, the out-of-nowhere firing in the middle of the season of Jack Easterby. We know Nick Caserio and Jack Easterby are friendly. We know one of the main reasons Nick Caserio is here is via Jack Easterby. What we don't know is how Nick Caserio has handled and operated post-Jack Easterby. Perhaps there's conversations in the building about how his job is so much more difficult now that Jack Easterby's here, or if they had Jack, things would be better. I don't know. But how guys act after something occurs that's large in the business is also an element in making the decision on those guys. And we just don't know how Nick Caserio's acted in the building post-Easterby. And we don't know if there's been some drastic change from pre-Easterby to post-Easterby as well.
Do we know if it was Nick Caserio's call to fire Jack Easterby?
I got a hunch that it wasn't.
Like, that could have been a decision made by Cal McNair, and kind of referencing what you just talked about, Cody. Maybe Nick Caserio wasn't down for that. He wanted Jack Easterby to stay here, and maybe Caserio's been acting differently since Easterby was let go in October. That could be an element at play here. But, yeah, this is a pretty unprecedented situation with what's going on in Houston. Jake, you've talked about it. I don't think you're alone. I think there are a number of Texans fans who would like to clean house this offseason. I feel like the vast majority of this fan base wants to move on from Lovie Smith and Pat Hamilton, right? Like, I feel like 90+% of Texans fans want to at least get rid of the coaching staff, but it feels like the number is growing of people who want to completely clean house and get rid of Nick Caserio and start all the way over. Right before the show started, I went to Battle Red Blog. They had posted a poll after this article was released earlier today, and they just asked their fans or their readers, should the Texans fire Nick Caserio? Only 144 votes to this point, but 28% of them said yes. That feels like a bigger number, a higher number than what we would have had a month ago, and a much higher number than what we would have had in the offseason. So it's like more and more Texans fans are maybe coming around to the idea of just starting from scratch and not only getting rid of the coaching staff, but getting rid of the GM so you have somebody new to bring in the coaching staff to try to get this thing right finally.
And I think a big reason for that is just how the year has gone on, right? It's like if Lovie Smith was doing horrible, which clearly they are, but there were some signs of these young players taking off that you could point to, maybe Texans fans would be more patient. But Nick's always going to be connected back to Jack Easterby, and this article talks about that. And I think fans, fair or not, hold that against Nick Caserio. And the reality is, unless Nick came in and just started doing like an unbelievable job, that was going to be a tough thing for him to have to overcome.
I think, too, you look in your division, the team that's been the team in this division for the past few years, the Tennessee Titans, in the middle of a successful season, in the middle of a season where they're in the playoffs, clearly going to win the AFC South, they moved on from a very successful general manager. And I don't think it's any coincidence that John Robinson gets fired yesterday, and then we start hearing about not only Nick Caserio, but I'm sure there's going to be more conversations around the league about other general managers. And I think this article, I read the Nick Caserio part, but the next few paragraphs were dedicated to the Broncos general manager, who's early in his tenure as the decision maker. And he's got a whole new ownership group to deal with. It's not like the owners that bought the team hired him. Like, he's got a whole new ownership group to deal with. So the Titans may have upset the apple cart and maybe made ownership groups around the league look around and say, well, hold on. They've never had a losing season since that guy got there. He's put together some of the best players on their roster, guys that he's drafted. They have one of the best interior linemen in all of football, Jeffrey Simmons, because he took a chance on him when it seemed like a lot of teams wouldn't. He pivoted off of a failure at number 2 overall at the quarterback spot and got them competitive. They played for an AFC championship, and they still fired that guy? What the hell are we doing with our guy when we've got 5 wins in 2 seasons and we don't know what to do? And he doesn't know what to do, and everything he's telling us is just wait, just wait, just wait. Like, what are we doing here? I got to imagine that was a conversation point with the brass of the Texans. Like, they go to the playoffs every year. They win the division every year. They never have a losing record. They fired their GM. We got 5 wins in 2 years.
They're regressing. The team's worse this year despite seemingly more talent on it. And I really think it goes back to the coaching search. I think Cal McNair probably lost a lot of trust in Nick Caserio's ability to run a franchise based on how they went from David Culley, who they just felt like they needed to fire. They could have kept Culley for another year, been bad again, and had a clear plan of he was going to be our guy for 2 years before we move off him. They chose to fire Culley because they were trying to win games this year. They were trying to be better. I didn't think they were going to be great, but I think we all thought they'd be a better team than what we have seen. So I understand why Cal McNair is starting to lose a lot of faith in Nick Caserio, and I wouldn't blame him at all if he cleaned house and started over, because this is a very attractive job for someone to want to take. Cap space, great city, first overall pick. If you believe in Bryce Young or Stroud, you got your quarterback. I think it's a great job. So if I'm Cal McNair, I'm definitely considering a cleaning of the house.
That, to me, is perhaps the most important element of moving on from Nick Caserio, is the opportunity in front of Nick Caserio is one of the better opportunities for taking over as a general manager. You're going to have a lot of cap space. You're going to have a lot of draft picks. And, yeah, Nick Caserio got you through these 2 years. He did a fantastic job with the Deshaun Watson trade. But just because he did those things, if you don't believe in him going forward, and I say this a lot of times, and this comes to relationships in life, it comes to relationships in business, and certainly this is one of those business situations. If you can't get the little things right, why would I ever believe that you can get the big things right? Like, if you can't get the little, small things of the job, the things that are less important, if you can't get those right on a regular basis, why would I let you get the big things right? Why would I let you take the chance on the big things? And I wonder if that's a conversation in the Texans brass about Nick Caserio.
Let me ask you this. There are some people who don't have faith that Nick Caserio could hire the right coach. Why the hell should you have faith that Cal McNair can hire the right GM if he moves on from Nick Caserio? What good hire has Cal McNair made, especially if he fires Nick Caserio this early into his 6-year contract? You're telling me you're putting your faith in that guy to go out there and get a really good candidate? Is that what people are saying right now? Like, just think about that.
What option do you have?
Keep Caserio. I don't think Caserio wanted Lovie Smith. We know he didn't want Lovie Smith.
He wanted
last
Josh
year.
McCown, though.
But we don't know if that would have worked. I have a hard time. I didn't think it would work. I'm not going revisionist history. I said what I said. It's out there. I can't imagine it'd be as bad as they are right now. So I feel like that is going to come into play here, is that Nick Caserio has the excuse, and it might not be enough for Cal McNair, but it's enough for me. He didn't want the coach that he brought in this year. He did not want that guy who was doing a worse job than David Culley is. So for me, that's enough of a reason to where I think he should actually get to hire a coach that he wants versus a coach that, here's your optics word, Cody, that the optics made them hire last year.
I think it's important to note that, to me, as I say, and I feel this is, I don't want to speak for you, BK, but co-sign it if you feel like it. To me, the best case scenario is that just Nick Caserio gets this right. Like, I don't believe changing a whole bunch of things, totally revamping the entire front office and the entire coaching staff all of this offseason. Like, I don't believe that is the best option. Like, the best thing that could happen for this franchise is just Nick Caserio gets it right this offseason. Like, you're adding extra risk if you do the wholesale changes that this article from the Washington Post has suggested. Like, to me, and my preference is still Nick Caserio gets this right. I just wonder if some of the outside noise has gotten a lot louder for the front office when they are assessing and considering Nick Caserio's viability as the general manager of this team.
Not even the front office for Cal McNair. He's there. No one's going to these games. He looks around and sees empty seats. 713-780-ESPN is the number. Good day to have Mike Florio joining the show. He'll join us at 5:30. We'll get his thoughts on this Washington Post story intimating that Nick Caserio is on the hot seat. We know about Lovie Smith. That's obvious. You're the worst team in football. It's tough to overcome that. Nick Caserio is a new one. Just a reset for those just tuning in. One high-ranking NFL official who interviewed with the Texans, who spoke off the record. 2, Jason LaCanfora of the Washington Post said, keep your eye on that one, referring to Nick Caserio's job. I don't think Nick gets to fire another coach, especially with Easterby gone. I'm hearing there's more to come there. Several agents were quoted in this story, so the buzz could be Caserio could be out at the end of the season.
I think one aspect, and BK, you've kind of alluded to this, that saves Nick Caserio when people want to have the conversation. Because, yes, I understand that Cal McNair is the person that is the ultimate decision maker in this, but Cal McNair is going to lean on Hannah McNair. He's going to lean on other people within the organization. He's going to lean on perhaps his mother, Janice McNair, in this conversation, and certainly whoever Cal McNair considers to be a friend. You know, we heard about how Bob McNair had great relationships with guys around the league. Certainly Jerry Jones and Bob McNair had a very good relationship from back in the day. So I'd be interested to know exactly who Cal McNair's confidants are when he talks about this. One of the biggest things, and this is something that if I really wanted to keep the job, and I was Nick Caserio, I'd say is, can I just get a normal year? Can I just get a normal year where I get to do whatever I want to do?
Yeah.
Like, can I just have one normal year? Because I took the job and I had to trade Deshaun Watson, then I couldn't trade Deshaun Watson. And then I wanted to hire a guy that I believe is going to be successful, and then you told me I couldn't hire that guy. And so, yes, the pivot wasn't great, but was there any pivot that was going to be acceptable for Nick Caserio once he was told he couldn't hire the guy that he wanted to hire? Like, if I was Nick Caserio, my argument would literally be, can I just have one normal year? Because, yes, in a world of chaos, I have not been able to execute exactly the way we want to execute and as well as we want to execute. But, damn, could I have one normal year at this job before you really make a decision on me?
Great point. We've used the word unprecedented way too many times when talking about the Houston Texans over the last few years. The whole Deshaun Watson situation, unprecedented. The whole Josh McCown to Lovie Smith situation, unprecedented. It just hasn't been normal. This hasn't been a normal GM job for Nick Caserio to this point. And he's 2 years into a 6-year contract once again, and he's been hamstrung by decisions that were out of his control. It just doesn't feel like he's gotten a fair shake yet. He hasn't done everything right, and there's things that you could point to that he did have his say in that he's gotten wrong. There's no doubt about that, but I feel like the grade is way too incomplete on Nick Caserio to make a move right now.
Let's see if Texans fans agree.